Hey fam, welcome to the Freetrail podcast. Of course, I am your host, Dylan Bowman, one of the founders of Freetrail. A couple of things to get to before today's show. Please, you're watching here on YouTube, smash the subscribe button if you don't mind. We're going to slowly try and build this channel over time. So hit the subscribe button so you can be informed each and every time we drop a new video here. Also, please consider joining Freetrail Pro. There's a link in the description of today's YouTube podcast episode. Join the community. It's only $100 a year. Connect with an amazing group of diverse runners from around the world who you can connect with, learn from, and follow along as we all take part in this incredible sport. Finally, we have a lot of great sponsors on our show. The show would not exist without the sponsors. Please do take the time to go to the show notes, click through, find the discount codes, and next time you're in the market for any of the great trail running products, please do consider visiting and supporting the sponsors who support us. Andy Pearson, happy Friday to you, buddy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here in my own home talking to you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have this conversation. I was recently a guest on your podcast, Between Two Pines. We'll talk about that a little bit, but
a little bit nervous. I feel like I deserve some payback, so I'm ready.
No. It was all in good fun. And anyway, I think a lot of people got some good chuckles out of that episode and out of a lot of the episodes. And again, we'll spend some time talking about what that creative outlet has brought into your life. But it seems that your life is filled with creative outlets, and that'll be sort of the focus of our conversation here. But before we get to it, I got to ask you my traditional opening question, Andy. That is, what makes you, you?
Ooh. Lots of molecules that are just coming together and spinning around to compose this like weird flesh suit that I'm kind of lugging around. And beyond that, I think a healthy enthusiasm for the absurd. And I think like that's really why I'm so drawn to this dumb sport we call ultrarunning, because it's so insane. I love the fact that we're like, all right, we're going to start here and then we're going to run 100 miles and then we're going to come back to the same place we started. And also we're going to pay money to do it and it's going to suck. That is one of the most insane premises for like a pastime that I've ever heard, which is that's what I love about the sport. And I think like the more we celebrate that weirdness of it, that's what I'm here for.
The healthy appreciation of the absurd. That's such a perfect way to put it. And I'm sure we'll find ways to bring that back into the conversation. Before we get to your career story, I wanted to ask you about your own personal brand, because I think it's kind of funny and fascinating. Your Twitter handle is I Even Wrote This. Your Instagram handle is I Even Shot This. Your personal website is I Even Wrote This Sick URL.com. Where did that sort of tagline or personal brand come from?
Yeah, I also had a Tumblr that was I Even Ran This for a while when Tumblr was still a thing. It was actually funny. I was back in like advertising school. It was kind of a post-grad school it's like an art school basically, and you have to put your portfolio online. And this is like fairly early on in the website game, and I was like trying to register andypearson.com, and it came up and it was like, this website has been parked, but you can buy it for $20,000. And I was like, fuck that. There's somebody out there named Andy Pearson who stole this website already. And then as a writer, that's like what I've like a copywriter by trade. I was like, well, what if I just use the URL to prove how good of a writer I am? And so that's where I Even Wrote This Sick URL.com came from. And then at that point, when I was just signing up for stuff, I was like, let's just keep this rolling and make it make sense across any platform.
I can't believe I Even Wrote This Sick URL.com wasn't taken.
I was lucky that I didn't know what I thought of that one yet.
Yeah, you could probably sell that for 20 grand at this point. It reminds me of Brian Powell buying iRunFar.com, and what a brilliant move that was back in the day. Freetrail.com, I think, cost me like $5,000, but best investment I've ever made.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you also, because I think you and I both share an affinity for LinkedIn. Like, you're a legitimate LinkedIn influencer.
LinkedIn influencer is what we call ourselves.
LinkedIn influencer. Talk about your influencer status on LinkedIn, and whether or not that's your favorite social media site, because it seems like you share a lot of stuff there, and a lot of stuff that obviously is relevant to your career, which we'll talk about in a second, but also a lot of like really informative and funny material too.
One, I just want to stop and say this is the first running podcast where LinkedIn has ever been like a common topic of conversation. I love LinkedIn so much because it is such a shit show. And I think like this goes back to the healthy appreciation for the absurd, because LinkedIn is just this place where everybody is sniffing everyone else's butts and brown nosing, and desperate. Like you can smell the desperation on people through your screen. And then the algorithm is so insane because it's closer to like a TikTok where it's like mashing up things that it thinks you'll like versus things you actually like. So you have all these people flying at each other that aren't actually connected, and it's forcing, but at the same time, everyone's trying to prove how smart they are. And so they're just leaving insane comments on things and getting in fights. And but they're also trying to be professional. It's just, if you step back and appreciate it as for the absurdity of it, I love it. And so I love just bringing more chaos to LinkedIn through a lot of the stuff we're doing with Liquid Death and just like my personal takes on stuff.
But it is a good place to learn. I mean, like for people who work in the creative and advertising industry, being able to get a firsthand take from you on what's happening in the space, or the reasoning and inspiration behind some of the campaigns that you guys run at Liquid Death, which again, we'll talk about throughout the course of our conversation. It is a great platform, and
I don't want to shit on it too much. I just love taking like a contrarian viewpoint a lot of times, because I think it's healthy to have like a skepticism about what we're doing, about what we're all doing. I think that's an important thing to have. So I like dispensing that as often as possible.
Yeah. So the healthy appreciation of the absurd makes me want to ask you again, before we get to LinkedIn, before we get to Liquid Death, about the Western States Lottery from the end of 2023, because that struck me as a moment of sort of perfect serendipity and absurdity at the same time. I'm sure your phone blew up as soon as your name was pulled. So fill the audience in about what I'm talking about here with the Western States Lottery and any absurdity that evolved after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, I ran it 8 years ago, and so I had 128 tickets in this year, so it was a 33% chance of getting drawn. But Dom Grossman and I, who share a podcast on Between Two Pines, as you talked about, we'd both been like cracking jokes about like this conspiracy theory that we were going to try to get in. And we had Craig Thornley on the podcast right before we were about to drop this episode. And we had the whole point of the interview we were doing with him was about like trying to convince him to get us into states and that no one would know if he did. And then come to find out, we both get drawn, and not just drawn, we get drawn within like 5 tickets of each other. It was something like that. So, I mean, I just want to be clear. There was no payment that was made to Craig. He has there was nothing shady that went on, but the mere appearance makes for great content. And then, so now Dom and I are both in, and we gotta, I don't know, we'll figure out if we're going to do like the first ever live podcast during Western States. I think that could be a nice something. So we'll have to figure out like our content strategy. And you texted us, you were like, what'd you say? You said like
a content gold mine, basically.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm sure the good people at UltraSignup, if there was a conspiracy, maybe they were involved in it, because they're going to be benefiting from the content gold mine leading up to Western States and after the fact on the Between Two Pines podcast.
I would argue everyone will benefit from this content gold mine.
Yes, they will. Yes, they will. Okay, so let's talk about career stuff. You're the VP of creative at Liquid Death, just a fascinating brand that I've sort of been following and observing from afar for a while. But for those who aren't familiar, just give the quick background. What's Liquid Death and what does it mean to be the VP of creative?
Yeah. So, as it sounds in the name, we're a canned water company, Liquid Death. We've been around for about 5 years now, I guess. It launched in 2019. And yeah, we sell canned water in what looks like big tall boys of beer, big aluminum cans. And so we have still water, sparkling, flavored sparkling, iced tea. Actually, yesterday we just launched an electrolyte drink mix. So we're coming for all those runners out there now. But yeah, the whole idea is like make a really insane brand that is just as fun, if not way more fun than every beer company, soda company, candy company, all the stuff that's bad for us, energy drinks. They all have like the coolest, funniest, most intense, hilarious marketing. And so could we take all that really fun energy and just put it against something that's actually healthy, which is water and other, we make a lot of other like healthier versions of beverages. And then on top of that, we have this death to plastic mission, because when you really think about it, all that bottled water out there, it's all, most of it is put in these single-use plastic bottles, and the sheer amount of waste that's generated from that is, it actually kind of makes you go insane if you really think about it too much. All those single-use plastics that end up in landfills and oceans and ultimately in bodies. So we're using aluminum cans that are infinitely recyclable. And so really making health and sustainability way more fun by kind of not talking about it at all. We just want to make a hilarious, crazy, insane brand that people love. And then like, oh yeah, also I can, if I'm trying to cut down on alcohol or want to cut out entirely, or I just want to have a water somewhere, I have an option that doesn't look like a dorky plastic bottle or obviously like an NA beer or something like that. So we're just kind of like hiding all the good stuff we're doing underneath this pile of insane marketing.
Yeah. And I think, to state the obvious, water is sort of like a commoditized market. And what you guys are doing is being very creative when it comes to the marketing and the brand aspect to bring some personality to what is sort of a commoditized, simple category. You said that you were sort of a copywriter by trade. I think you've worked in brand and advertising for a while. Just give us the quick background on that and what led you to Liquid Death, because I just listened to How I Built This with Mike Cesario, the founder, and it seemed like maybe you guys worked together prior to arriving at Liquid Death too.
Yeah. So it's actually funny. My ultra running and advertising careers are kind of weirdly intertwined. So, yeah, as a copywriter, you're just sitting around coming up with ideas for ads or, crazy ideas or whatever it is. And then you're actually the one, writing it. And then I've kind of come up since then to become a creative director and overseeing more and more and more. And so now I oversee basically anything that Liquid Death puts out in the world is, from me or my team. And, but yeah, I got my start actually at this agency called Crispin Porter Bogusky that is, was based in Boulder, Colorado. And so I randomly got this job and ended up in Boulder, not as a runner or anything. I met Mike there. He was there as well. And, I just like got to Boulder and I was like, what am I doing here? And the job at the time, it was crazy. We were known as this sweatshop rather. And like to the point where there was a magazine cover of like one of the big pubs for the advertising industry. It's called Creativity. And there was a magazine cover with the top guys at the agency, all photographed as if they were running a sweatshop with the employees like chained to desks. Like it was
because Crispin's one of the biggest ad agencies in the US, isn't it? Yeah.
It was. So we did a lot of we made the Burger King a thing back in the day and did crazy stuff for Microsoft. And it was really the most innovative place for advertising for a good stretch of like 15, 20 years. But the work environment was nuts. Like I was working till 11 o'clock every night. I didn't take a break for my first probably 5 months there. I don't think I even had a single day off in 5 months. I was working like 80, 90-hour weeks, which I don't even know if that's mathematically possible, but I was. And yeah, and so it was funny. I actually, like, the way I got into ultra running was because of that, because I was in Boulder. I didn't even know, I didn't know anything about Colorado. I didn't know that this was the thing. This is in like 2008, like right as kind of like Tony was getting started or right around there. And
we're of the same era, bro. This is exactly my story too. Same time frame.
I have like the most stereotypical story where it was like I saw Christopher McDougall on the Daily Show. I didn't watch TV, and one night I randomly flicked on the TV, and he was on the Daily Show talking about Born to Run, which, if you're of an era, that's the only way he found out about ultra running.
The Bible.
And I was like, that's insane. And I'd always loved running. I'd always, liked it and wanted to get into it, but that was like really the spark for me. And it was funny. Like I was just working this crazy job, and, waking up, we would just go out on the weekends with all our friends, because there were so many people at this agency. It was like being on a college campus almost in Boulder. Boulder was so small. We had 750 people that worked there, and we were all lived around the downtown area. And so we just go out and partying. And, I had enough mornings where I'd like wake up like hungover in Boulder, and I would just like look up at the mountains and be like, I feel like I should be doing something. This feels like a waste, but I didn't know what to do. And then so this Born to Run kind of, came into my life, and I just started running and running more and more. And it kind of just didn't stop. And and it became this really cool thing that I realized as I sort of unintentionally ran a marathon, and then I decided I would do a 50 and then 100 and so on. But I was like, oh, I have this thing that's as equally insane as my job, that I'm working all these hours. I'm spending all this time out in the mountains on these trails. And if they're like so diametrically opposed, if they're equally insane, they're counterbalances to each other.
Yeah.
And so it actually gave me boundaries on my job, where I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't come in until 11 o'clock on Saturday, because I have to go run, 28 miles up in the mountains or something like this. So they became these like really crazy counterbalances to each other. And yeah, so anyway, yeah, that's my running story is kind of intertwined with Liquid Death in a weird way.
What about Mike? Because, as a LinkedIn influencer, I was looking at your profile, and it seemed like you guys both worked at that Humanaut agency too. And he talks about Humanaut in the How I Built This episode with the Save the Bros campaign, which is one of the great ads of all time. How did you and Mike meet? And, I don't know if there's anything you want to say about, what you guys did at Humanaut.
Yeah. So we crossed paths kind of at this place in Boulder, and then he ended up going off, and he ended up at this place that you're talking about in Chattanooga called Humanaut. That was kind of a spinoff of the place we were just talking about. And the whole idea there was like, we have a finite amount of time on Earth. And what if we spend it doing, like, promoting things that we actually care about, that are actually good for the planet? And so, or for our bodies or whatever. And so the idea was to make organic and health brands actually like fun and not dumb, right? Like all the marketing out there, it's just talking to the same Whole Foods NPR crowd, right? And so it's like, what if we made it accessible to everybody? Because everyone wants to be healthier. They just aren't, they aren't recipients of that message, or they're not targeted as much. So that was a lot of stuff we were doing there, was organic brands like Organic Valley, which is the Save the Bros thing, and a bunch of others. And so Mike was there for a little bit. He was actually the first creative there. And then unbeknownst to me, my wife and I actually came in and started freelancing on contract for that place right after Mike left. So he was there for a year, and the seeds of Liquid Death were kind of starting to sprout as he was there thinking about making healthy stuff that's actually interesting to people and that thing. So he was having that idea as he was at Humanite. He left, and there was this need for more creatives. And so my wife and I actually were traveling. We took a whole year off our jobs and we just traveled the world for a year. Before we were like, hey, before we have kids, let's go travel. This is actually all ties into Western States, because I was also training for Western States while I was like traveling in Cambodia and Vietnam and Laos. And that was crazy to be trying to train out there. And so we started working for Humanot and came in. And so I kind of got that sort of feeding of like, hey, what if we spend our time doing stuff that is actually meaningful and not just what we're told our job has to be? And so, yeah. And then we reconnected later on, and Mike just kind of texted me out of the blue about 3 years ago and was like, hey man, what are you up to? And then
I need help.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause he's doing a lot of the stuff himself at Liquid Death. And so, yeah, we had a lot of the same connections. I'd actually done some more freelance work for him. And so, yeah, he brought me in, and it's been a crazy 2.5 years.
Yeah, man. And the brand is an absolute rocket ship. I've heard you talk in other places about kind of the difference between entertainment and marketing, and identifying that everybody hates marketing, but everybody loves entertainment, more or less. Just sort of paraphrasing what my interpretation of your statement was. Say more about that, because I think it's core to the creative that you guys put out.
Well, it's like, and this is something we were doing at Humanot too. It's like, nobody likes ads. Like, even everyone in the ad industry thinks it's so important. And you're like, no, it sucks. All ads suck. No one is. I was just looking. There's a list of like the least trusted jobs or least trusted professions in the US. And the bottom number 7 is advertising. And it's like just above like used car salesmen and lawyers and a couple other things. No one likes it, but like as an industry, we always think we're so self-important. So I think that's what's nice about what we're doing is we just admit it. We're like, advertising sucks, marketing sucks, nobody likes it. So what if we just made something that entertained people first and foremost? And yeah, it'll like function as an ad, but we just want to make, our whole thing is just to make the funniest thing that someone sees that day. And that's kind of that's a fun job to have.
That's what I was going to get to, is like, it feels as if working in the creative team at Liquid Death is probably like working in the writer's room of some comedy show. And obviously your podcast Between Two Pines is very much a comedy show about trail running. Barely. To what degree is like comedy been important to you? Was that sort of like an angle that you applied to all of the creative projects you've worked on going back to when you were a kid?
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think that I'm learning to be funny, I guess I'd say. Like, I always thought I was, had kind of a funny-ish perspective on stuff, but I don't think I'm like I'm not like a stand-up comedian, but I don't think it takes that. It kind of takes that, like I was talking about, that kind of little skepticism to find a really funny idea. And I think that's what we're doing with Liquid Death. It's like, it's kind of taking this like outsider viewpoint, and we do kind of make it like a writing on a TV show. Like, we talk a lot about like SNL. We kind of approach it that way, where it's like, hey, what's the funny skit that we can write about this piece of culture? Or, we've done, so we have a bunch of celebrities that we've pulled in. So we've done stuff all from Tony Hawk to like Bert Kreischer to like, we got freaking Martha Stewart in a video once where she was chopping off people's hands and making candles out of them. And that was like the proudest moment of my life, where I'm like on Martha Stewart's farm. One, scared shitless of her. She's terrifying. And and I was like, what are we doing here? Martha Stewart is chopping off hands. This is a real high point in my life. So yeah, it's fun.
Khalifa, the world's finest bong water. That's another good example there too.
Yeah. So it's like, we just get to have fun with celebrities. They want to play with us. So we get to just pull them in and do insane stuff. And everyone is also just genuinely really nice. So they want to play along.
So I've heard Mike, again, the founder of Liquid Death, who you have a long working relationship with, say that the company's sort of internal philosophy when thinking about creative and ads and marketing is like, what's the dumbest idea we can come up with? What is like the importance of dumbness in the creative brand strategy with Liquid Death? Can you articulate how dumbness is a priority internally?
I think dumbness is the ultimate smartness, and that's not a word. But like, I don't know. This sounds silly, but I think there's like a real art to just pure stupidity that really speaks to me. Like if you go back and because we do stuff with like Steve-O too, so that's a great example. Steve-O, he's super nice and does a lot of. We've given him a water tattoo and we made voodoo dolls out of his hair and sold them so that people could could stick needles in him or lick him or whatever. But like go look back at all the stuff that Jackass was doing. Like that stuff is art. It is high art. It just on the surface seems like the dumbest thing, but it is a real expressive art form at a certain level and kind of a commentary on stuff. So that to me is always like, that's what I love is taking something and having this weird tension between like how dumb it is and at the same time through that stupidity how kind of brilliant it can be. And again, I mean, look at running. Like it's the ultimate, it's like one of the ultimate expressions of athleticism, but it's so stupid also. And that's why I'm compelled to it, because it's, like Vol State. I did Vol State a couple of years ago, and you want to talk about a dumb race. I mean, that's about as dumb as it can get. Oh, Barkley. I mean, Barkley is a brilliant race.
Dumb.
Right? And it's so dumb. And I love it. Like that's why I love it. And so that's the stuff that's really compelling to me is the like, and that's something that I love about running is I think like people don't really think about it this way, but running to me is like a really creative expression in a lot of ways, because I don't know, when I'm running, I'm always like crafting kind of a story in my head of what's happening on the run and what this run is about. And I kind of early on realized that like running is this kind of personal form of storytelling and creativity. And you're getting to experience all the stuff that like people in the, I don't even know, the normal world don't get to experience. You're literally, it's almost like, it's like psychedelic drugs without the drug part, right? Running is a form of psychedelics in a way, because you're on the edge of, to get really metaphysical, you're on the edge of human experience. You're getting to see all these places and both physically and kind of internally that a lot of people don't get to go. And I think that's a really cool and creative space if you kind of stop to examine that.
Have you read Alchemy by Rory Sutherland?
No, sounds like I should.
So I don't know anything about advertising, but he's like a longtime Ogilvy executive, sort of apparently one of the longtime gurus in the advertising space. But a lot of what he says, I think, shows up in Liquid Death, and that a lot of it is premised on doing the thing that's counterintuitive or the value of doing things that are irrational. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that maybe you could point to from your career where that's been powerful? Because I guess it feels like almost everything that Liquid Death does could fit in that category.
Yeah, it's funny. The first ever real ad I made was wildly irrational. It was, and it wasn't even real. It was, so like I said, I was at this, art school for advertising creative in Atlanta called the Creative Circus. And it's basically, you spend 2 years just learning how to write, be creative, make fake ads. And there is this big award show called the Cannes Festival of Creativity. It's think of like the Cannes Film Festival, but it's like slightly less cool because it's for advertising, but it happens a month later. But people are probably drunker at advertising one. And so they it's a big deal. If you win a Cannes Lion, is what they're called. It's like, that's the pinnacle, because it's the biggest worldwide international festival. And they have something called Future Lions that are they give out 5 every year to students. So five teams of students across the world will get one of these Future Lions. And my now wife and I won one of the 5 back in 2008.
No shit. I didn't even know that, man.
And but it's really funny because so we won one of them, and then I actually have it right here. This is the award.
No way.
And
Future Lion, yeah.
And it was a kid robot toy. They made these like only a couple of kid robot toys.
So right when you were reading Born to Run, you're also getting recognized as a future top advertising executive, it sounds like.
And so we won one of the awards, and then another team from our school. So 2 out of the 5 awards in the world were from our school. But we found out because they sent us this email. They're like, "Hey, congrats, you guys won. Just wanted to know if you're going to be here in person to pick the awards up next week." And we were like frantically Googling. We're like, "Where is Cannes?" And then we're like, "Fuck, it's in France? Oh my God." And so we're like, oh, so we do all the math and we're like, okay, for 4 of us for tickets next week to fly to France, that's just $6,000 right there. And then to stay on the French Riviera for a week, that's another $4,000 for all of us. We're like, we need $10,000 tomorrow. And so I was like, well, how do they raise money in movies? Like, that's where my thought went. I was like, so I was like, car wash. And I was like, I don't think anyone's going to give us $10,000 at a car wash. Maybe we make $100. And then I was like, keggers. Cause there's always like in the 80s movies, it'd always be like, do you raise money through a kegger? And I was like, I've lost money anytime we tried to put a pitcher out at a kegger in college. And then I was like, bake sales. And then I was like, well, if we just sold cookies for $500 a piece, we only have to sell 20 cookies. And I was like, we could totally sell 20 cookies. So, so overnight we like did this photo shoot. We put this website up called cookiesforcan.com. And we blasted, we just sent it out to like everyone that we could know. And we're like, hey, we're trying to raise money. We won this award. We don't have enough money. So we're doing a bake sale and we're selling cookies, and the cookies are $500 a piece. Sprinkles are $100 extra. And yeah. And
sprinkles are $100 extra.
Trying to get slide in a little bit there. And nothing happened. And then like the next morning we got a call from someone. They're like, hey, from an agency. And they're like, hey, we want to buy a dozen cookies. And we were like, no way. And so that was $6,000 that they were just going to give us straight up. And then another agency was like, hey, we want to buy 2 cookies. And then a couple other people bought like little pieces of cookies. And essentially we made $10,000 in 24 hours, and got to go to France and pick up this award in person. And it literally launched my career. I met people there that ended up getting me jobs down the road and all this stuff. But
wow, what a great story. That's brilliant. And this is like sort of at the advent of the social media age. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is the value of like the organic sharing of content. It seems like that's been central to this meteoric growth in Liquid Death, and a great way to scale brand awareness and audience in a cost-effective way. And especially like when you're featuring quote unquote like non-brand safe messaging, it ends up driving a lot more of that brand awareness, brand attention, and using the comedic voice. And I heard you say somewhere, you know, everybody knows like what a viral video is, but that you see Liquid Death as one of the first viral products. Say more about that and what way social media really led to the growth.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we kind of we all live on social media, right? And for better or for worse, I guess. And yeah, I mean, if you look at the can, if you've seen it, it just looks like an insane beer. And in fact, a lot of people think it's like, we do surveys and people think it's like a super caffeinated drink, or it's like an energy drink that's going to make your heart stop, or it's some crazy malt liquor or whatever. But because it's a water, it's sitting on the next to like the Evian and Deer Park and all this stuff on the shelf. And so, yeah, so and it's called Liquid Death. I mean, the whole idea was, it was literally like, hey, if there's zero marketing dollars, what's something that if we named it this, it would literally stop you in your tracks. And so, and you would almost have to like take a photo and send it to a friend or like post about it. And so that's kind of what I mean when I say like a viral product. Like the first time you have it, it just, it's like you don't have a frame of reference for what this thing is. And so it stops you. And so that's why a lot of people were initially sharing it. We get posts all the time and people just like, they'll just be like, what is this? And they'll just like, that'll be the post. Or they'll like, there was one the other day of like an old woman in a nursing home where her like grandchildren are trying to feed her Liquid Death. And she's like, I'm not drinking that shit. Like people they think it's going to kill them. And like, I don't think legally we could sell something that would kill you. So it just is the brand's like already fun to begin with. I have a really weird, thesis that I feel like you'll appreciate, which as a disclaimer, this is not endorsed by anyone else at the company. This is my own personal thesis, which is, do in Back to the Future 2, the like Biff Tannen like takes over and like Marty McFly goes back to 1987 and like the whole world is destroyed because Biff Tannen is like the most rich guy on earth and everything. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I mean, not really, but I get the gist of it. Yeah.
Okay. I grew up watching Back to the Future whenever I was homesick. But it was like the world. It was the world that everyone knew, but it was all like run by biker gangs and there's bars in everyone's windows. The whole world was a facsimile of what we have, but it was all messed up and dark and weird. And so sometimes I like to think of like, what if Liquid Death is just like how you would market water in that world. Like it's the same world that we know. It has all the same pieces to it, but like the world itself is twisted, 20 degrees this way. And so sometimes that's I think the fun of it is it feels like it comes from this other dimension where it like, we talk the same way that brands talk. We kind of, say similar things, but it's just coming from it's originating from like a weirder, darker place in a different dimension.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe just to add like a finer point to this for the audience, I've picked 3 campaigns that I've noticed from Liquid Death in recent memory, and maybe we'll ask you to just.
I want to stop you and tell you how prepared you are and how professional this is. Blown away, and I appreciate it because this is not the level of professionalism we're bringing to our own podcast.
Oh man, this has been one I've been really looking forward to as somebody who enjoys, brand and marketing and products and the intersection of all those things. Liquid Death has been, I think, one of the best in the world, and we just so happen to have an Ultrarunner sort of creating all this amazing creative behind this incredibly fast growing brand. So the first one I wanted you to talk about was the Super Bowl commercial. Cause this I mean, you could probably add some quantifiable measurements to how it impacted the brand. Obviously it must've been a huge investment just knowing how expensive those advertisements have become. So talk about the Super Bowl ad you guys ran a couple of years ago and what way it sort of launched the brand forward.
Yeah. So 2 years ago, basically what we did was, we bought a spot on the Super Bowl that looked entirely like a beer commercial, and it was set to a cover of Breaking the Law, the Judas Priest song. It was actually covered by Fat Mike from NoFX. Yeah, it's a bunch of people dancing around slamming tall boys and passing out and all kinds of craziness, except every single person in the ad is like a kid. So they're just, it looks like all these kids are slamming beers and dancing and passing out. Yeah, we actually, it was funny. We almost, and it's intercut with like all these product shots that if you knew what Liquid Death was, you'd be like, oh my God, this is hilarious. If you didn't know what Liquid Death was, you'd be like horrified that they could run this on the Super Bowl. Right. And we actually took like, we looked at beer commercials and we almost stole shot for shot some of the things in old, Coors Light commercials or like Mickey's commercials, or we could find these old like 90s spots. So yeah, so it just immediately blew up anywhere that someone saw it. And so it was really great because you would see on Twitter, it was like 50% of people loved it and then 50% of people hated it and thought it was the
That's exactly what you want, probably, in advertising.
It's exactly what we want. Well, it's not what people in advertising want, but for us, we're like, if we made 50% people love it, 50% of people hate it, man, that's like where we want to be, right? Because at least people are reacting and having a visceral, interesting reaction. I mean, the worst thing that anyone can feel about something is nothing, right? And so yeah, so that went from it just immediately exploded. People who at least knew the name Liquid Death. I mean, a lot of people still thought it was a beer or something, but from there, that really kind of was this first like big spark on a national level that we had.
I'll make sure to link to it in the show notes so that people can watch it and get a chuckle out of it. I think it's like 30 seconds. I watched it again this afternoon.
The only TV commercial we've ever run. Like most brands are spending all this money running on TV.
I saw you post it. That has been recognized as one of the top 20 Super Bowl ads of all time. And it's the only TV ad you guys have ever run. Yeah. Andy Pearson, you're an icon in the advertising world. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Real. Yeah. And just to maybe fill in some gaps, it is truly hilarious. Just like 9-year-old kids, like drawing on each other's faces like they're drunk at some college frat party, but they're just pounding waters. And then there's like a pregnant mom at the end just chugging water. And anyway, breaking law.
It was the most wholesome set I've ever been on because it was literally kids dancing around and drinking water. Like that's all it was, and it gets all this hate from people like, this is terrible. And I was like, I don't know. The kids seemed to be having fun when they were dancing.
The second thing I wanted you to talk about, this is where your genius as a LinkedIn influencer really struck me, and that's the slaughter bottle campaign. Talk about the slaughter bottle. There it is.
I have all these props on hand. Yeah, this was a simple one. I mean, we do all kinds of merch. We launched literally like over 100 different pieces of merch throughout the year that range from just t-shirts and hats to we've done yoga mats and beach towels and watches and all kinds of stuff. And yeah, it was really funny. We'd talked about doing a water bottle for a while and we had kind of gone around like, oh, we could do this design and this design. And I was just like, I think it'd be really funny if it just looked like a giant can of Liquid Death, because I think that's what people want. I remember years ago, actually the job that I got after that whole can thing, I got this job at this place called Wyden and Kennedy in Portland. That's everyone knows their work because they basically invented
Nike. Yeah.
Basically invented Nike. And we had Starbucks as a client at the time. And I remember sitting in a Starbucks and seeing that they sold coffee mugs that were just shaped like the white can, the white mug, or the white, cup. And I was like, that always struck me. I was like, wow, people want the thing that looks like this other like disposable thing that they have. Like it's such an iconic piece. And so, yeah, I think with this, it was like, I think it'll just be funny if it looks like a giant bottle, a giant can. And yeah, and then we came up with this silly name, the slaughter bottle. And
which is perfect.
Yeah.
The slaughter bottle. And we should mention, people probably know this, but the whole premise of liquid death is that you're murdering thirst. In fact, you're wearing a hat right now that I think says liquid death murderers on it. So the slaughter bottle is just like the perfect extension, the perfect brand to attach to this non-disposable, sort of like vessel to carry your hydration in.
Yeah. And it's awesome. And people have loved it. I mean, it's been cool. So that's the fun thing is you just get to like, we get to make jokes in like weird ways. Like how do you make a joke with a water bottle? But that's kind of the fun. It's not like we're just making ads. We're just kind of making like fun ideas and throwing them out there. I think like to me, liquid death should feel like you should feel the joy and exuberance of like ideas and humor. And like hopefully that kind of is what flows out of the brand. Is like we're having as much fun making it as people should have receiving it, and so I think Slaughterbow is like a really simple example of that.
So I pulled up the post that you did about it on LinkedIn. And since you're a copywriting professional, maybe this is a good example for our audience of your brilliance. I'll just go ahead and read it. What you said is introducing our most exciting liquid death advancement in thirst slaughtering yet. The slaughter bottle. Before it was the slaughter bottle, it was just a can with the dream of dismembering thirsts repeatedly until the earth gets sucked into the sun. It trained, it bulked up, it underwent dangerous experimental procedures at the hands of the least ethical scientists, and now it's the reusable slaughter bottle. This towering, hulking drinking vessel is armed with a lid allowing for eternal reusability and brutally murdering thirsts from now to the end of time. In test marketing, people were literally cutting each other's heads off to get one. When we launched it 2 days ago, it sold out immediately, but you can pre-order yours now. It's just like, it's such a brilliant way to sell a water bottle. Like, it's just brilliant. It's just brilliant. Okay.
Well, that was written by one of our writer. He's this guy, Brendan Kelly, who is just he's a madman. And he has had his own career as actually several pretty successful punk bands and was a writer at The Onion for a long time. So yeah, I get to work with like really wildly creative people from all kinds of backgrounds and stuff like that.
You must just laugh nonstop every day in the office. Okay, the third one is the one that you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that just launched today, or maybe it was yesterday. That's the Death Dust. So talk about the Death Dust.
Yeah, so we were stoked on this one. We're getting in the electrolyte game. So yeah, we launched these little packets. They've got 340 milligrams of electrolytes in them, just 35 calories. And it's kind of the first time we've done anything with like a real functional benefit. So, so it was like, oh, we actually have to have like a premise to something rather than just making it haha funny. And we kind of, it's more angled on, rather than like athletic performance, it's more like a recovery, which can mean recovering from, you had a big night out or something like that, or at the gym or whatever. So yeah, we just started talking about this idea of like, people say they're zombies if they're hungover, they feel like a zombie or they feel brain dead or whatever. And we're like, what if the premise was, what if you actually turned into a zombie when you were hungover and you just started eating your friends? And so if you watch The Spot, it's this woman who is an actual zombie and her friends are about to chainsaw her head off because she's eating someone named Ted. And then they realize like maybe she's just dehydrated. And then they give her this, in this really cheesy way, they give her this liquid death dust. And then it transforms into this like insane Mentos commercial. Like basically we were watching like a lot of 90s Mentos commercial for anyone who remembers those. And there's a jingle about electrolytes and not being a zombie but it's all these people who have recovered. So they're not zombies anymore, but they still have eaten people. So their faces and clothing are just like covered in blood. So you might feel better, but you can't get away from the consequences of what you actually did.
Again, just so brilliant. And I don't know. I just think like the fun thing about this conversation is that Liquid Death is one of the fastest growing consumer products in the world right now. Probably. You're a trail runner and
Alcoholic brands. Yep.
fastest growing non-alcoholic beverage brands. Unbelievable. And so you're sort of like steering the ship that is marketing led, and that you can sort of oversee the strategy and creative that goes behind, a company that is very much sort of like at the forefront of people's minds in the consumer space and in the food and beverage and CPG space. Our sort of equivalent of murder your thirst is trail running will save the world, right? So there's like sort of I don't know, I guess as I think about it, it's obviously on its face kind of an absurd, ridiculous thing to say, but there's like that small kernel of truth of like, if you're a trail runner, like how beautiful it is and how much it contributes to your own personal health and happiness. But so even though in all likelihood it won't solve all the problems in the world, if you say trail running will save the world, there's some emotional connection there that, resonates with people in the same way that, the slaughter bottle might resonate with a consumer looking for a new reusable bottle. Anyway.
I mean, all humor is based off of truth, right? And if you can get someone to laugh at something, you've actually made this connection, this really powerful connection with them. And so I think, yeah, anything that, like you're saying, if you can kind of laugh at this funny notion, there is something there to that, and you've reached someone, and you both are agreeing that there's something true there. So yeah, same kind of power.
So we'll sort of transition to your running stuff here now, but I'd love to hear you just talk about, because we just said that this brand is growing so incredibly quickly, I think getting close to $1 billion in revenue. And as the business scales, there's probably some pressure to tone things down. Like, how do you maintain the disruptive, comedic, kind of bold voice that the brand is, known for now?
There's not. I mean, honestly, we're like, we have to double down because that's like what everyone expects, right? I mean, then the whole thing, I mean, when you talk about murder your thirst, like that's a satire of all marketing. Like a tagline that is that dumb and weird and violent, like it's sort of this like crazy commentary on how it's like no real brand would have that as their tagline, right? And so same thing, as we get bigger, the more that we get bigger, the more people have that question. They're like, well, you got to tone down now, right? And for us, we're like, absolutely not. We got to keep doing the same thing. That's how we got here. So yeah, no plans there at all.
There is infinite thirst to be murdered around the world.
Yes.
So let's talk about your running. I think, that the thing that I was going to identify here too is just like the common theme of absurdity. When we talk about your running, it's Big's backyard, it's Barkley, it's Vol State, Bigfoot, Cocodona, like all the biggest, most difficult, most ridiculous, in some cases nearly impossible races. Talk about that, maybe that common thread of, the relentless appreciation for absurdity, or whatever you said at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, again, like if you're not pushing into some new space, it's kind of like, what are you doing, right? Like the first time I ran my first ever race was the Holland Aspen Marathon up in Bend, Oregon, and I finished, and I was like, cool. And then my next thought was like, okay, I never have to do that again, because I know I can do that. And so immediately I was like, well, I guess I'll run a 50 miler next year. And so that's sort of always just been my thing was, okay, great. And actually the beginning of that weird descent into ultra running madness was at the finish line of Western States 8 years ago. I remember I finished, and I had, certainly have not run it as you have, but I felt like I strung together a pretty good race that I was really proud of, and probably the best race that I could have done. And I was like, okay, I'm not scared by this anymore. I don't feel like I have a thing to learn. I don't have that thing where I'm still trying to learn it. I've sorted it out. And so that, like, crossing the finish line, I was like, okay, now I have to do Bigfoot. And then it's funny, the Barkley thing, I think a lot of people want to do that, and I never had any desire to get involved with Barkley. I was just, I don't know, it seemed too far to grasp for me. And but then I read about Big's Backyard before it was like a thing. It was Laz had written, or Gary had written in Ultra Running. It was, when they just would do race reports, it was like these little race reports, and he kind of written up it was like the second one they'd ever done. And I read the kind of the explanation of the race, and I was like, oh my God, this is the perfect race. This race it's like it's the ultimate form of competitive running. It literally doesn't get that much better than that, right? It's ultimately down to two people and who wants it more. You don't get that when you're just racing 100 miles point to point, right? And I just became obsessed with this idea of Bigs. And they canceled that next year. They brought it back the following year, and I like immediately signed up for it. And I was like a really early proponent of that race. And I wrote pieces about it for Trail Runner, and I got Guillaume to come to it, which helped the following year blow up even bigger when he went, 250 in that. But I remember in the race, I had this moment where in the middle of the first night, I was like, oh, I'm doing really well. And, I was like finishing the loops kind of, on the front end, like with it, I was kind of one of the second or third person finishing the loops a lot of times. And I was like, I'm doing really well. I'm kind of in the front. And I look over, and I was like, but everybody else is also here. And there was always this joke. If you go there, it's always like you cross the line. You're like, yep, you're in first place. You're in first place. Everyone's in first place. And like at that moment when I realized, I was like, oh, it just kind of like broke apart my idea of what running kind of was all of a sudden, because it's like, oh, as long as you're going fast, you're winning. And then suddenly I was like, oh no, we're all winning until we lose. And it's all this level playing field all of a sudden. And it's this mind game. And so that was like doing Bigs, just kind of like, I don't know, I guess the equivalent is like when the first time, again, you do like some psychedelic experience and you're like, oh, there's so much out
like
there.
An ayahuasca trip or something.
Yeah. And so I was like, whoa. And so that was just kind of a fun moment in that where I was like, oh, racing can be this really creative, interesting thing that doesn't just have to be about how fast you can go. And
yeah,
also,
dude, you did Bigs for the first time in 2016. That was way before it became the international phenomenon that it is now.
It's a bummer. I could never compete now. But that year I got the assist. I was second place that year. Because
was that the first running of Bigs, or was it the second?
It was the third or fourth, because Johan had come previously and had thrown down like, man, I forget what it was. He went 160 or something like that.
Yeah. Now you need to run 450 to have a shot. It's crazy. This is maybe an interesting thing to like tie everything together too, because I've always said that Laz is a marketing genius, right? If you look at the races that he's created between the Barkley, Big's Backyard, Ball State, as somebody who works in marketing, you probably have an appreciation or, at least an informed perspective to apply to someone like Laz, who, of course, for those who know him or know of him, you wouldn't associate with branding and marketing and stuff, but there's some brilliance behind him. Say a few words about that. And also, like, the one thing that he's less known for, but that you've mentioned, is Vol State. So people would probably love to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if Laz is the anti-brand. Laz, if you look up on, like, this is what I always loved. It's like, if you look up on UltraSignup, it's like Big Backyard Ultra, and then elsewhere it's like Big's Backyard Ultra, and then there's like, it has like 3 different names.
Big Dog's Backyard Ultra.
That's right. Yeah. So from a branding standpoint, he's a mess. But I think honestly, Laz is one of the two geniuses I've met in my life. That guy's literally a genius, very unconventional. But that was through my just getting to literally see him every lap at Biggs. That's why I wanted to do Barkley, because I was like, oh man, I want to be around this thing that he's doing. And so I was like, cool, I just want more of it. And that's what got me into Barkley. It was Laz. It wasn't this like thing that everyone wants to run. And yeah, I just, when I talk about like creativity and running, I mean, he's the ultimate example, right? He's literally creating new experiences for people. And if you've talked to him or you've, read about him, the Barkley's designed to push the actual boundaries of human ability, right? It's the goalpost move every year. And the whole idea is everyone should think it's impossible until someone proves otherwise. And then the goalposts move again. And I think like he's talked a lot about that. He's been a high school basketball coach for years and years. He's a real coach. He like, for all his character of hating runners and trying to put them through misery, he genuinely deeply cares about all the people that put themselves out there and get on the starting line to try this stuff that he's doing. And he wants to see them. Everything he's doing is mind games to make people strive to be their absolute best. And Biggs is such a brilliant example of that too. He created this format, this now worldwide phenomenon that is literally showing the boundaries of human ability. And everyone keeps breaking through that barrier almost year after year. We keep chipping away at that. So he's created this amazing gift, I think, to our entire sport.
Is there part of it that inspires you in your own, as you think about the creative parts of your career, like how you can implement the spirit of Laz into Liquid Death? That would be the perfect partnership if Laz would ever, take sponsorship for the Barkley or something. Liquid Death as the title sponsor would be absolutely perfect.
I'll have to try to pitch him that. He probably could stand to make more than $1.60 on race entries. He's probably he's losing money every year, so maybe he will take on a sponsor. Yeah, but I mean, like every race he does it's the idea of the race, not the race itself, right? I mean, Vol State racing, 500 kilometers across the state of Tennessee, 5 states, you touching the 5 states with zero aid, and you're just living out of gas stations and Taco Bells and sleeping in driveways and ditches. I mean, it's a wild race. And that's not even his craziest race. Hots now he made Hots because Ball State got too soft. So, for those who don't know, Hots, Heart of the South, it's the same premise, but you don't know where the starting line is. You just know where the finish line is. And the starting line changes every year. So you get on a bus not knowing where you're being taken. And then you get dropped off 340 miles, 346 miles from, like one year it's like, surprise, you're in South Carolina. And you had to run all the way back to the finish line. So, he has this knack for creating these compelling journeys for people, and that are compelling from the inside and compelling from the outside. And so I just, that's the kind of stuff I want to do. That stuff's interesting.
It's so funny, man. So brilliant. And yeah, such a clear through line to what you do professionally too. All right, let's start winding down by talking about Between Two Pines. I was one of the first guests on the show. I was probably guest number 3 or 4 or something like that. Yeah. And I love the show. And it fills such a perfect, I guess, like white space in what is a now very crowded, trail running, podcasting ecosystem. So obviously Dom Grossman is a good friend of mine. I've known him a long time. He's sort of who put the two of us together too. Talk about how you and Dom sort of came up with the idea and how it's been so far.
Yeah. So Dom is annoying. And for years he's been pushing this idea of Between Two Pines. And he's like, It's actually literally, he was like, I just want to get Dylan on a show where we can just roast the shit out of him and just make it super awkward. Like, he literally was laser focused on designing a show around you, more or less. And it's talked about this for years. And I got hit up maybe like a year ago by David Callahan, who is one of the partners now over at UltraSignup and all the lovely things that they're doing over there. And he was like, hey, I love Liquid Death. I would love for you to start a podcast for us. And I was like, absolutely not. It's like, no way. And I was like, in fact, here's a list of like 5 other people you should talk to. And I literally gave him, I was like, talk to her. You should talk to him. He would be great. Maybe you could pair them up. I'm like doing anything to get out of making a podcast. And I was like, oh, also my buddy Dom won't shut up about this idea. He has this thing of Between Two Pines. And then maybe like a day later, David just texts back. He's like, what if you and Dom did Between Two Pines? And I was just like, fuck. Yeah, I have to do that now. And so that's how it started. But yeah, the whole idea was like, again, it's like, hey, we have this insane sport that we all love, but I think we treat it with too much reverence sometimes. And obviously that's a really important part. And I mean, you have to be dedicated. You have to think critically about this and gain knowledge, but also let's like appreciate how silly a lot of this stuff is. And I mean, honestly, like I don't have time to sit through podcasts. Like I'm probably not going to have time to sit through this one and listen to it once it's live, to be honest. So we're like, how can we just like package something short and dumb and silly that feels really fun and frivolous and just give someone a good laugh? So it's been fun because I don't know what we're doing. I've never done this before. And like I said, I don't think I'm a necessarily funny person, but I mostly just did it to force myself to learn how to do this. And so it's really funny to see all the negative feedback we've gotten by people who don't get it. It was so funny. We just posted an episode with Andrew Glaze yesterday, and all the Glaze heads out there, I don't know if that's their real names, but that's what I'm assuming they are, because we had some question in the video we posted of like, well, what about your knee? In the video, we're like, yeah, that's most really hurt your knees. And so all these people that didn't get it are like, oh, the knees question. You know, people are jumping on us and not realizing it's kind of
it's satire.
Yeah. Which is what I love. I love like making something that you're like, what is this thing? You know? Yeah. So it's been a fun experience, and we're still messing with it and the format and playing around, but it's kind of fun to do it live and figure out what we're going to do next.
Glaze, he's the guy who did the Canyons 100-miler and then like the next day or something went and did Cocodona, right?
Canyon Donut is what he called it. Yeah.
Canyon Donut. Unbelievable. Cool. I haven't gotten around to listening to that one yet, but I'll cue it up here for when we're done recording.
Yeah. And he's on his, I mean, now he's like probably 205 weeks straight of running 100 miles plus every week. I mean, just the guy's bonkers in an amazing way. But I always joked, it's like watching someone slowly die on Strava, just like slowly committing suicide over years and years. Yeah. So it's just been fun, like, you know, messing around and getting goofy people on there. And we've got some big plans for some other fun guests and fun concepts for the show.
Awesome. Well, content gold mine leading into Western States. You guys got to do like some sort of training updates here and there where you guys just roast each other for your terrible workouts and lack of consistency and the fact that you both have 2 kids and you're.
I like that you're assuming we're going to fail. That which is probably accurate, but appreciate that.
Well, Andy, dude, super fun to have you on the show. Learn more about you, learn more about, your job and your career. Like I said, I'm a big LinkedIn follower of yours and always enjoy smashing the thumbs up button when you post new stuff over on my favorite social media app. My traditional closing question is, who is one person that you admire inside or outside of sport, living or dead, and why do you admire that person?
I always say the person that I have that's closest to a hero is Andrew WK. And I don't know if you know who that is. I implore everyone to look him up. He came out, he's a musician. He came out in like 2002, I think, with an album, which is like just the album cover. He's got long hair, and the album cover is like he supposedly smashed himself in the face with a brick, and he's just bleeding out of his nose everywhere. And it's like party rock, like party metal, and like in this first album, 4 of the tracks out of 10 have the word party in them. It's like party hard, party till you puke, party. I forget what the other ones are. But he just, and there's all these conspiracy theories around him. You could go down a whole Andrew WK rabbit hole. He set a world record for the longest drumming. He did 24 hours straight of drumming. He set a world record. But like, if you look at it, you're like, is this guy serious or is this a joke? And the answer is probably both. Which I love. I think, again, there's like this weird joy and this like grayness of, is this real or is this not? So yeah, I adore Andrew WK. It's the best concert I've ever been to. I've got like signed posters of him. I mean, he's my hero. And he's also my lazy Halloween costume, because you can't tell now, but normally I have really long hair. So when I have long hair, I just put on jeans and a white t-shirt and then put like fake blood in my nose, and I'm just Andrew WK. So I'm really gushing over him. So I guess he is my hero.
Yeah. Well, another rabbit hole to go down for me here. As soon as we're done, I just Googled him, and yeah, it seems like there's abundant material here on the internet about this seemingly bizarre human being. But yeah, again, it's very much like what we've been talking about in this entire episode, sort of like that intersection of absurdity and practicality, and what's real, what's serious, and what's complete satire. So anyway, Andy, great to have you on the show, buddy. Congratulations on Between Two Pines and getting into Western States. Excited for the rest of the content goldmine.
Okay. We'll give you a front seat ticket. Don't worry. Thanks, man.